I'm George غالاوي and I present كلمة on Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Mayadeen television. Welcome to كلمة with me, George غالاوي, on Mayadeen television. Coming to you from London, but discussing Palestine. Just a couple of weeks, actually, after the centenary of the Balfour Declaration, in which Britain, on behalf of one people, promised to a second people the land that belonged to a third people. One of the worst and certainly a unique imperialist crime, because Britain didn't even possess Palestine at the moment that it gave it away. Well, the centenary celebrations or mourning have passed, but the issue of Palestine deepens. It hasn't gone away. Now, we're asking in this discussion, will the recently signed unity agreement between Fatah and Hamas and the prospect of a unity government take Palestine forward or take it back, or leave it becalmed because so many other issues are burning in the Arab world, maybe literally so by the time you see this program. Now, I have been involved in this issue since 1975, so 42 years. I was for decades very close to the leader of Fatah, the late President Yasser Arafat. In the period of the siege on Gaza and my efforts to try and help to break that siege, necessarily I had to deal a lot with Hamas. As it happens, I'm not a supporter of either party, and therefore I'm perfectly neutral in this discussion, which is unusual for me, let me tell you. The proximate reason for the rather dramatic and sudden signing of the unity agreement was the presence, spectral presence, of someone called Mohammed Dahlan, who, it looked for a few weeks at least possible, might have signed an agreement of his own with Hamas, effectively installing him in power in Gaza. That's significant because he is a rebel leader within Fatah, a rival for the Palestinian presidency to President Mahmoud Abbas, based in Ramallah. Now, the prospect of such a deal brought Abbas quickly to the negotiating table, and a deal has been signed, which may have been the purpose of the Egyptian courtship of Mohammed Dahlan in the first place. Either way, the deal is now done. The question is, will it stick, and will it make any positive difference? Just for those who don't know, this breach between them has lasted a decade. Gaza and the West Bank have been effectively sundered for 10 years. President Abbas's presidential mandate ran out 8 years ago. The Hamas election victory in the parliamentary elections also has run out. There is therefore no democratic legitimacy either on the parliamentary or on the presidential level in Palestine. The Palestinian people have not had a chance to vote for their own leadership, and if the powers have their way, they probably still won't get the opportunity to do so. Don't forget the immortal words of then Senator Hillary Clinton, later, of course, the presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, in which, after Hamas had won the elections, she said we should never have allowed these elections to take place, and if those elections were to take place, we would have needed to be sure who was going to win them. That's the kind of cynicism that the so-called democratic world uses in its approach to democracy for the Palestinian people. My own view is that until there are new elections and a new political leadership elected, the Palestinians will never be able to maximize the importance, the moral importance of democratic legitimacy in their struggle. And in any case, as long as the Arab world is tearing itself to pieces and preparing for new, Abdel Bari Atwan has just written a devastating piece in which he predicts actually a general war throughout the Middle East, which will change it out of all recognition and lead to the destruction of many of the currently existing Arab states, including the states most determined to create the war. So, in the 42 years that I have been involved in this struggle, well, I'm not going to say I've wasted 42 years of my life because I made a lot of friends, but we're definitely not any further forward in the legitimate demands of the Palestinian people 42 years after I joined the struggle. Maybe I should have stayed it away. Maybe I helped to jinx it. Anyway, we've got an audience here of distinguished experts and some enthusiastic amateurs like me. Who's going to talk first? Yes, my dear friend, go ahead.
Well, George, unity is our strength, and I think this time we sense a true intention on part of both sides, Fatah and Hamas, to reach a national reconciliation. This time it could be different, as we were let down previously by many meetings took place in different countries. I think there are a number of reasons why. I think the first one, there is a green light by the U.S. administration for the Palestinian Authority to go ahead with this deal, simply because the U.S. Israel wants to distance the Palestinian resistance groups from Iran. And also the main reason is to contain Hamas, Islamic Jihad movement in Gaza, in case if there is any war against Hezbollah or Iran. So they want to make sure the Palestinian resistance is not involved in any upcoming war, God forbid. The second reason is the Palestinian Authority, of course, reached a decision to strike a deal. Obviously, Israel is not interested in peace. 20 years, more than 20 years of peace talks proved to be futile. The Palestinian Authority said, why not we try to regain control of Gaza, because without regaining control of Gaza, Palestinians cannot ask the international community for a Palestinian state. The third reason, which is Hamas. Hamas has been under siege in Gaza. The Palestinians have been under siege in Gaza as a result of the parliamentary elections, and the situation has been very miserable. The funds were frozen. The tunnels which served as a lifeline for the people of Gaza were destroyed. So the situation is unbearable. And as the United Nations said, Gaza will not be inhabited by 2020. So because of these reasons, I think the time is ripe for the Palestinian parties to sit down on the table and start implementing the reconciliation talks. It has been already implemented. Hamas has relinquished power in Gaza. Delegations from Fatah in the West Bank came to Gaza. Palestinians in Gaza, Fatah supporters mainly, marked the 13th anniversary of the death of Yasser Arafat. So I think we are progressing towards the implementation of the deal. Things are different. There are many regional developments going on in Saudi Arabia, Libya, Lebanon, and so on. I think Palestinians are let down by the so-called the apathy of the international community. So they have realized that unity is a must at this critical time. And because of the insistence of the international community not to recognize Palestine as a state, as we saw Netanyahu came to London to celebrate, which is an insult to the Palestinians. So at this sad event, Palestinians staged rallies in London. I think the three main demands were an apology, a recognition of Palestine, and also Britain should be held responsible for the atrocities that were, perpetrated against the Palestinian people. So I think I'll end here. Unity is a must.
Well, let me ask you some questions, if I may, because you're from Gaza and you're an expert analyst on what's happening there. You say that Hamas has relinquished power in Gaza, but they still have their military power on the ground. They still have their hands on the economic levers, such as the economy of Gaza now is. Isn't the national authorities' presence in Gaza merely lipstick? It may have positive benefits. It may allow them to control the crossing point into Egypt, which might then allow the traffic of people and goods and so on, but only if Israel allows it. So please comment on that, and comment also on whether Israel will allow it. Israel's reaction to the unity agreement was quite low-key. They didn't jump up and down very much about it, which leaves me to believe that nothing very good is likely to come from it, therefore. If Israel isn't opposed to it, then there's probably not that much in it. Tell me.
I think Hamas said they will never relinquish their arms, although they said they are willing to hand over the control of the crossings, mainly areas in the northern part of Gaza and Rafah in the southern part of Gaza. And they said, we have no problem for the civil servants of the Palestinian Authority to take over the ministries and so on. They have already done so. But this issue is a very sensitive. I think we might experience some impediments on the way, because Israel, the US, and other regional powers, they will impose pressure on the resistance, mainly Hamas, to relinquish their arms. So I think this is a ticking bomb. I think Hamas is aware of this. The Palestinian Authority will utilize and use this as a justification to pressure Hamas to relinquish its arms. On the other part, I think the Palestinians, they don't mind or they don't care who is taking control of Gaza anymore, because they have been suffering miserably. So they welcome the Palestinian Authority's forces into Gaza. They urged Hamas to make concessions to reach a national reconciliation. So let's wait and see what's going on, because I think the atmosphere is very, very positive nowadays, and people are hopeful that we will see an end to this black and bad chapter of rift and division between the brothers of Hamas and Fatah.
Who else would like to contribute? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Qaid Gayaba, and I'm a human rights campaigner. And what I would like to say is that the way I'm reading it is it's all about calculating the environment and trying to make the best out of it. So Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and every partner to this kind of deal, they've seized the opportunity that it's all about mutual interests. So basically, the borders are not going to be opened until Egypt is in agreement with it. Hamas, can't really pressurize Egypt to open the borders. We know that there is a regional relationships that are impacting and influencing the situation in Gaza. So basically, there's a coalition, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf countries, and versus Syria, Iran, and Qatar, everybody else. So basically, Egypt will not upset Saudi Arabia. Egypt will not upset Mahmoud Abbas. So basically, the borders will not be opened or lifted until Hamas come back to the negotiation table and make the reconciliation with the Palestinian Authority. So they have no choice, basically, in the matter. And I'm optimistic because of that. I think there will be a reconciliation deal. And I don't think Hamas will have a choice about arming, disarming, all that kind of thing. Because if the Palestinian security forces don't come back to the borders, they will not be opened again. So basically, I know that things are moving slow at the moment because obviously the Palestinian Authority has not taken the security points yet. And yes, the ministries of health, social services, home office, everybody has come back to Gaza, but the security is still controlled by Hamas at the moment. And that's why the border has not been lifted. They have not been opened yet. So basically, I think we are moving ahead toward the right direction, but I don't think it's out of a choice. Because if the borders are not opened, the people of Gaza will continue to suffer. And I think that's what's going on.
Okay. Yes, madam.
Gaza has been under siege for 10 years, as we all know, a siege that no people under the sun should have to go through. And this siege is propped up by the US, the EU, and some US-supported dictatorships like Egypt and Saudi. Whether this reconciliation is going to ease the suffering in Gaza or not, it remains to be seen. But one thing we have learned from history, specifically the history of the resistance in Lebanon, is that Israel will not concede even 1 little centimeter without resistance. The resistance and its tools are what we need. Without the resistance, we don't stand a chance. They are not a bargaining chip. They are above party politics. That's what I really want to say here. Without the resistance, we don't stand a chance, and we shall never, ever give up the resistance.
Well, that's... you see, in the conversation so far, it's as if the goal of the Palestinian people was to relieve this latest atrocious suffering. But of course, if that were the goal of the Palestinian people, they could have surrendered 70 years ago, and they would now be Israelis. So there has to be some other purpose, or what was all that resistance and sacrifice for? And if you, in order to relieve this latest, it's only the latest, embargo, which by the way was imposed by Abbas as well as by Israel and its Egyptian ally, then if you disarm the resistance as part of the quid pro quo for this, then what's left is really what I'm asking you.
Nothing. Nothing is left. Greater Israel is left. That is all that is left. And it's not an option. It never has been, and it never will be.
Yes, madam.
I don't want to be too much pessimistic, but the issue about the Fatah and Hamas reconciliation is very important as a first, like a step forward to move on from these, division. Since, years and years we've been divided. The Israeli side actually taking advantage of this, trying to persuade the international community, particularly Trump, that this is because they are divided, we cannot talk to. Where are we going to go? Who we would like to talk to? So the reconciliation is very important. However, I'm saying this, I would like to emphasize and saying the consolidation of the PLO is also very important. It's because it's the only representative for the Palestinians.
Does it still exist effectively?
In all, and it has to be activated. I agree with you. We don't need to go through these things. We do. I do actually want to see PLO actually activated. However, I have a message to the Iranian and particularly to Mr. Rouhani. From this platform, I would like to urge him, if he would like to see the Palestinians united, we would like him not to support one party, to support the whole Palestinians and united them. So this is my message to this side. The other side of maybe the Saudi Arabian or the other side of coalition, I am saying the same thing. Do not involve us in this, war, because we are going to be the weakest link in this situation. We are going to be the victim and victimized from both sides. We don't want to be in this situation. We had been through a lot in Lebanon to emphasize that and consolidate that PLO is our representative as a Palestinian. However, and also I would like to see the voice for the Palestinian refugee highly, not voiceless, to talk and to be representative more within the the negotiation or anything is going to happen.
There'll be lots of opportunity for more discussion after this. With me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, discussing the peace accord, the unity agreement between Fatah and Hamas. Let's continue with the debate. Yes, madam, you have the floor.
Hi there, my name is Kaisan Kustrem. I'm a human rights activist. I just want to talk looking from the outsider's perspective. Obviously, I'm not Palestinian. The last time that there was a reconciliation attempt in 2014, Israel came about with an operation called Brothers Keeper in the West Bank, and they raided Hamas offices and took money and imprisoned many of the Hamas leaders which are in the West Bank. So as an outsider, I would see that Israel would do anything to try and prevent any kind of reconciliation, even if it goes along in the public eye as pretending to go along with it. So that would be my main concern. But there's nothing I'd love to see.
Unless they've been satisfied that this is actually good news for them.
In Israel's favour, yes, in regards to dismantling the resistance and things like that.
Yes, the gentleman in the middle.
George, Muhammad Khatib speaking. You mentioned in the beginning is agreement between Hamas and Fatah and Mohammed Dahlan and Egypt. What the agreement? Is it good for Palestinian people? They are suffered long time, or they play dirty games with the Palestinian life?
Well, you tell me. I'm just the host here.
How far they can go with it, please? Thank you.
Well, I mean, you have to look at the environment in which this has been cobbled together. And you have to look at the fact, as I've just implied, that Israel is not against this unity agreement. And if Israel is not against this unity agreement, it seems to me that that's unlikely, therefore, to be in the Palestinian interest. I have a very simple view, because I'm quite a simple person. If you want to end a foreign military occupation of your land, you have to raise the cost of that foreign military occupation, not just militarily, though you can't do it without military realities, but between the hammer of resistance and the anvil, sindan, of international solidarity. Wheeling and dealing between this alphabet soup of Gulf satrapies, none of whom you would trust with your goat, is going to lead to the liberation of Palestine, because none of them have any interest in the liberation of Palestine. If they had, they would have, Palestine would have been liberated long ago, as soon as they acquired the power of oil and gas and sovereign wealth funds and huge budgets for military purchases from Western countries and so on. The levers of liberating Palestine have been in the hands of the very people who are now brokering this. And the contradictions in it seem to me to multiply every time I hear Palestinians talk about it. For example, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Sisi are all in favor of this agreement. But they are all also allies of Dahlan, who we've been told has been banished from the political scene. I'm going to cut out and keep that statement that you made and play it back to you sometime. The people who allowed Hamas to suffer the Operation Cast Lead and the repeated assaults on Gaza, which massacred thousands of civilians, are the people now brokering this deal. I know that because me and and Fran and other people may be here. We led the convoys to break the siege, and we know exactly the problems that we had in places like Egypt, and not only Egypt in that. So I personally don't trust any of the parties involved in this. And if I were a Palestinian refugee in Rashadia, I would say there's nothing in this for me. Maybe quite the opposite. It will be the opposite of there being something in this for me. Yes, brother.
محمود السرسك ناشط فلسطيني. يعني بداية لما بنتحدث عن الوحدة الفلسطينية بين تنظيمين كبار فتح وحماس، قبل ما نقف على هاي النقطة لازم يعني نقف على المحور اللي بتكون جديد، اللي هو بزعامة السعودية من شقة، وبزعامة اللي هو إيران وقطر وتركيا من جانب آخر. لو لاحظنا تصارع القوى، أكيد ميزان القوى المقاوم يعني اللي هو المخرز بقاوم كف إيدها السعودية والإمارات والخليج العربي، مدعومة بقرارات دولية من أمريكا وأوروبا. لو رجعنا كفلسطينيين وسألنا أنفسنا بدنا مصالحة، أكيد كل الشعب حيقول لك صحيح أنا بدي مصالحة، وتمت إجراءات المصالحة في مصر، ولكن مصالحة يعني مخفية. الشعب لم يطلع على أي شرط من شروط المصالحة الذي تم الاتفاق عليها فيما بين فتح وحماس. سكوت إسرائيل بخجل على الاتفاق معناته أنه هناك يعني تنازلات كبيرة من أجل إتمام المصالحة. موافقة السيسي على شروط السعودية والإمارات والمحور اللي هو بنتمي له ليمشي اللي هو المخطط الأمريكي اللي بقوده محمد بن نايف في المنطقة، واللي حتندرج يعني خطواته مش بس على فلسطين، على الدول اللي حامية فلسطين، اللي هو محور المقاومة متمثل بالجنوب اللبناني، مقاومة حزب الله في سوريا، في الإمدادات اللي هي تدعم المقاومة الفلسطينية في الداخل، واللي كان آخرها يعني اللي هو يعني زي ما شفنا استقالة سعد الحريري. هذا كله يعني مرتبط في القضية الفلسطينية أو بجوهر اللي هو المصالحة الفلسطينية. المصالحة الفلسطينية كنا بدنا إياها، ولكن بدنا إياها بشروط الفلسطينيين أنفسهم، مش بشروط اللي هو العالم الغربي اللي قاعد يعني بزرع معادلة جديدة في الشرق الأوسط. اليوم لو طلعنا في الفترة السابقة كان هناك يعني الفلسطينيين قاعدين بيحاولوا انهم يتقربوا من بعض لبعض في يد خلفية اللي هي كانت الإمارات، اللي هو كان محمد دحلان قاعد بيمشي ملف المصالحة بأموال إماراتية سعودية بحتة. ولكن أجى الوقت انه انكشفت الفترة الأخيرة اللي هي المقابلات الرسمية والزيارات الرسمية فيما بين الإمارات والسعودية ودول الخليج لإسرائيل، وبالتالي دور محمد دحلان اللي كان للإعلام انتهى وتصف على جنب، وصارت ما في عندهم أي مشكلة اليوم بعد ما الإعلام كشف إنه يصير حوارات وجه لوجه أو مباشرة ما بعنيهم. ولكن زيارة محمود عباس للسعودية أعتقد إنه هدفها هو جلب حماس من يعني محور المقاومة اللي هي ذهبت له لزيارة قطر وعودتها، وطلب يعني طلب إعادة علاقاتها مع سوريا في الزيارة الأخيرة واللي قام فيها الشيخ صالح العروري عضو المكتب السياسي لحماس لطهران. في المقابل السعودية في حفنة الإجراءات اللي عملتها هي أيضا ضاغطة على محمود عباس بأنه يتمم إجراءات المصالحة، وإن كانت إجراءات المصالحة حتعود على القضية الفلسطينية بالسوء كما أتوقع، إلا أنه اليوم المحور كله بفكر كيف يجلب طرف ربحته إيران ولبنان وسوريا ومحور المقاومة اللي هي قطر وتركيا أيضا متمثلة معهم، ليرجعوه ثاني لحضن اللي هو الإخوان المسلمين اللي هو الفرع اللي ماشي مع سوريا والإمارات. نتمنى أنه المصالحة تتم بين فتح وحماس، ولكن دون يعني خسائر تعود على الشعب أو تنازلات بعد التنازلات اللي شفناها، موافقة حماس على 67 واللي كانت رفضاه بداية في أوسلو، وأيضا التنازل اللي صار اللي هو من قبل السلطة الفلسطينية. إحنا فلسطينيين أصحاب حقوق، مصالحتنا يجب أن تكون مدعمة لمقاومتنا لاسترداد حقنا في أرضنا.
Yes, Fran.
Fra Hughes from Belfast. George, the more I understand what's happening in Palestine and the Middle East, sometimes the less I actually believe that I know. But watching from the outside, when I see what's happening in the West Bank with the continued expansion of the Israeli settlements, it seems to me, and I hope I'm not out of place saying this because I'm not a Palestinian, but it does appear that the Palestinian Authority seems to be, in many respects, facilitating the building of the settlements, because whenever the Israelis go in to arrest people in the Aida refugee camp, you know, the PA police and soldiers, the armed face of the Palestinian Authority, have to return to their barracks to allow the Israelis to go in and arrest 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds who they're accusing of throwing stones and maybe put in prison for 5 years. So you have the PA accepting money from America and from the West and from abroad to basically facilitate the expansion of the Zionist project into the West Bank. So if Hamas, who appear to have been tortured on the rack of the siege, then secede power to the PA, this will potentially see the end of the resistance in Gaza, because the PA will then become a coordinating security link between Israel on one side of Gaza and Egypt on the other. And the permanent threat will be, as has already been mentioned, closing the borders and reinitiating the siege if Hamas doesn't play like the good boys that both the PA and Israel want. And Hamas is a direct threat to the PA because, as in previous elections, they were chosen as the political representatives of the people, an election that was not ratified in the West or accepted as the diplomatic will of the Palestinian people.
Who can tell me what the current state of political opinion is in the occupied territories, which is, I repeat myself, a small percentage of the Palestinian population as a whole? In other words, if we had another election in the occupied territories, who would win? What would be the relative balance? Can anyone give me their view on that? Yes.
I just would like actually to answer your question. Resistant actually means has different meaning. And you know, as you know, that the Palestinians has been resistant since 1917, since the Balfour Declaration, not just since the 1948. But we had different stages, different eras of resistance. Just to answer your question, but about the reconciliation, I don't know if you read the reconciliation agreement between Fatah and Hamas, which says first of all that the whole parties, factions, they should be under the umbrella of the PLO. And as long as we are divided, we're not going to achieve anything. We are serving the Israelis' aim because they don't want to see any Palestinian union together.
But they want this agreement.
What? No, at the beginning they didn't. They were actually.
I've just been reading the Israeli press.
Sorry, but they started actually to mourning at the beginning, and they were complaining against the Egyptian at the beginning of the reconciliation agreement. But what I want to say is it's not about this. It's about the reconciliation, saying the reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas agreement says that we have to activate the PLO, and everybody has to become under the umbrella of the PLO, because this division is not serving us at all, because as you may know, or if you heard about the centenary Balfour Declaration, which recently all these voices were against the Balfour centenary, the Balfour Declaration in the UK particularly. They never and all the respond from the government, particularly those who were supporting the celebration of the Balfour Declaration. They were saying we wanted the two-state solution. We wanted to see these two-state solution, but they did not talk about any word about the refugees, the Palestinian refugees. And my question was for my MP. I was asking her about what about my Haifa right? What about my parents who were forced to leave Haifa to become refugee in Lebanon. What about my Haifa right? If this is the situation, why I don't have the Balfour Declaration? The second part of the Balfour Declaration says non-Jewish existing, there shouldn't be any effective of the prejudice of
yes, of course,
non-Jewish community
yes,
existing in Palestine. So I was asking her, what about Haifa right? My Haifa
yes,
right.
Of course,
so
that's not.
no, let me just,
No, the people watching this already know that.
Let me just link it with the
I asked a question and
Sorry.
you said you would answer.
I would like to answer your question.
No, you can't.
No one of them.
Break.
Sorry. I have to say this
I
before
need to
you
take
finish.
a break.
Okay, it's fine.
After the break. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, discussing the unity agreement between Fatah and Hamas. We took the camera onto the streets of London to see what the people thought. Take a look.
It's been 100 years after the Balfour Declaration. What does this mean for the Middle East today?
Well, I think it still has quite a divisive opinion throughout the Middle East. It was 100 years ago as a piece of paper that divided up an entire state. It cost people their homes and their lives because of it. It's a short document written in a bygone era, and it's now defined an entire area of the world.
That it is a very saddening situation. That until this day the Palestinian people continue to not have a homeland, whereas obviously it was and still is their homeland, and they were evicted from land that was theirs.
Well, the Middle East, specifically the Palestinians, are obviously quite upset. They've been fighting for this for 100 years, and it would be, I guess, quite damaging to them to lose that.
Palestine belong to Middle East, and the Palestinians need to get their own rights.
Today I think people are coming more to terms with having sort of acceptance for Israel as a state, and Palestine too. But I think the general sort of animosity towards the Balfour Declaration is pretty justified in that the way that Britain split up the Middle East with its own sort of agenda has caused massive divisions and war and death.
Well, pretty good. I'm quite proud of the British in that little vox pop. Now, before the break, I was seeking to ascertain what the current level of political support for the different trends within the Palestinian arena was. So let me ask, you're an expert, tell me.
It's Kayed again. I would say that if you ask every single Palestinian in the street these days, everybody would agree that reconciliation is the way forward. Nobody wants the status quo to continue because everybody's tired of seeing division, and this is what Israel really wants, is for us to continue to be divided. So in terms of the popularity of Hamas in Gaza and in the West Bank versus the popularity of Fatah in the West Bank and Gaza, in my view, that Hamas has lost a lot of popularity both in Gaza and the West Bank. And so is Fatah in some areas, but they've gained some credibility in some areas.
Really?
I think for the simple reason that Hamas was willing to strike a deal with Mohammed Dahlan, for example, that has made the public think that Hamas has no principles in terms of their ideological thinking, that Mohammed Dahlan represents nobody. He's evicted or dismissed from Fatah, so he's not any political figure anymore. He represents himself and he has followers, but he's not a recognized leader of the Palestinians for Hamas to strike a deal with him. So why would Hamas resort to a relationship with Mohammed Dahlan. That, in my view, was disappointing.
Okay,
So
let's hear over here.
I think in terms of the developments or the turmoil in the Middle East and the region, we are hearing something called the deal of the century, which ultimately means getting rid of the resistance and the resistance camp, etc., and minimizing the influence of Palestine on the world. I think for the elections, what the ordinary Palestinians care about is they need a leadership that puts the national interest of the Palestinian people above their factional considerations. So if any elections would take place in Gaza, I think the popularity of the PA, by the way, declined sharply because Abbas himself, he imposed some sanctions on the civil servants of the Palestinian Authority, and the Fatah party in Gaza has been neglected for over 10 years. So I think what's going to happen, according to some polls, I think Hamas might win the parliamentary elections in the West Bank. The PA might somehow lose its credibility from the scene. But what people are calling for, they need technocrat candidates. They need people who are not affiliated to both Fatah and Hamas because they need to have a decent life. They don't want this kind of factional interest.
Well, I mean, you might very well be right. If that's true, then it's all been for nothing. If Palestine now wants a leader who's a technocrat to make life under occupation better, then what was the point in resisting Israel and occupation in the first place? For me, if I was you, I would elect Marwan Barghouti as the president of Palestine, inside the prison. I would get back to a situation where you could be proud of being a Palestinian activist and fighter again. Now, if you want a technocrat, I'll give you 100. I'll give you 100 that have worked in the banks here and the IMF there, or for some corrupt tyranny here or there, and they might bring down the price of bread and oil. But if that's all it's about, I'm not sure why we're even bothering to make a TV program about it.
You cannot go against the currents. Look at the developments in our region. You know, Trump is alliance with Saudi Arabia, the Emiratis, against Iran, Qatar. I mean, things are changed.
Well, I'll tell you how they've changed. The resistance won in Syria. The resistance is undefeated in Yemen.
No doubt about that.
Well, the resistance has won in Iraq. I mean, that's one current that you describe, but there's an alternative current. And if I were you, I'd adhere to the alternative current. I'd say, I'm a part of the resistance. And if I live all my life short of bread and cooking oil, I'll still tell my sons on my deathbed, you should adhere to that too. Otherwise, it's all been for nothing. That's my honest point of view.
Yeah, I said that at the beginning, that the Palestinians need a true leadership that puts the national interest of the Palestinians above the factional considerations. Obviously, Palestinians are let down by the current leadership, whether it's Hamas or Fatah. I mean, in terms of the resistance, no one denies that the resistance is a must. The resistance must not raise the arm. Whereas the PA leadership somehow is being pressured by the U.S. administration, is being blackmailed. The sellers of the Palestinian Authority, yes, I mean, supplied by the U.S.
They've become a charity case. They're going around with a bowl saying, who's going to pay our wage bill this month? Madam.
Hello, my name is Hafiza Ibrahim. I'm an ordinary Palestinian living in diaspora, and listening to all the opinions here and the explanation from everyone's point of view make me feel less optimistic about the practice of the conciliation agreement. However, to give a principle because of a human relief, this is not a cause. Palestinian people have a cause, and they've got a great and a pride to keep themselves recognized between themselves and the other people. To sell your principle for a piece of bread, I don't think this is good enough.
17 years ago, 17 years ago, Faris Odeh took a stone and stood in front of a tank and threw it at the tank, and now he's dead. He would have been 32, but he will live forever. Why? Not because he had a technocratic plan to make the economy run more smoothly, or because he had a way of getting the international community to fill the charity bowl, but because he was ready to give his life for the liberation of his land, for his country, and to drive out the occupation.
And that's
Am I right?
why we still a bit, I will say, because before we were more respected in the whole international community because of our principle.
Totally. Right, the gentleman in the hat. I always recognize the man in the hat. Go ahead.
That was the reason we have to clear our house inside from Hamas and Dahlan and Fatah, whatever, to start a new life for Palestine.
Is there anyone else? Is there any other new political forces coming up? Yeah? You got one? Tell me about it. I'm in the market for it.
Mr. غالاوي, we have مثل شعبي بيقول اللي بيجرب المجرب عقله مخرب. احنا جربنا فتح، كانت فتح رائدة في العمل الثوري وكل الشعب كان وراها في مرحلة من المراحل، ولكن فتح وصلت لنقطة دمرت كل اللي عملته مع احترامي لتاريخ حركة فتح الناصع. حماس كانت حركة رائدة في العمل المقاوم، في لعبة صغيرة ما بنعرف هو انضحك عاقلها أو إما امتيازات قدمت لها أسقطوها في فخ السياسي أو المعترك السياسي، وبالتالي أصبحت ورقة محروقة. الشعب عاش بكرامته لما الطفل الصغير أمه كانت تزقه من البيت ويمسك حجر ويطبش. هاي كانت كرامة الفلسطيني والصورة اللي ارتسمت لكل العالم. اليوم إحنا محمود عباس هدد أكثر من مرة في حل السلطة، وأنا بقول حل السلطة هو الحل الناجح في ظل تعنت إسرائيلي وتوسع وتوغل استعماري أكل كل فلسطين. ما خللناش 22%، على الورق بقول 22%، ولكن إحنا مش ضايل 22%. اللي محتاجينه إنه ترجع الكلمة لإرادة الشعب. الشعب هو اللي يقرر. في عنا ميادين في العالم كلها، أحرار العالم كلهم يعني بيقاتلوا معنا في الBDS، وإحنا لازم نكون المعول اللي بنقاتل من داخل فلسطين لنحررها، مش برنامج سياسي مرسوم من الغرب للقيادة الفلسطينية اللي يطبق في حكومة دايتون وما غير دايتون وكتير علامات استفهام. الشعب الفلسطيني ما يلزمه فقط هو أن يشلح عباية الاتفاقيات الدولية والعودة للحجر والمقلاع من داخل المخيمات لتحرير أرض فلسطين. اللي محتاجينه فقط اللي محتاجينه اللي هي روح أبناء فلسطين لتحرير فلسطين. محتاجين قائد وطني، ممكن الكل أجمع على مروان أو غير مروان، ولكن محتاجين واحد يعني يمثل الروح اللي كان فيها ياسر عرفات مع أبو إياد ورفاقه في الفترة اللي سبقت أوسلو.
Let's see if there's anyone who wants to speak who hasn't yet spoken.
My name is Mahmoud. I'm Palestinian from Gaza. I'm here today because of the agreement between Fatah and Hamas. Why shall we talk about the election and the President Abbas and this? I'm asking everyone here right now a question. Do you know any paragraph of the agreement was done in Egypt between Fatah and Hamas? What's the benefit of it? First of all, another things. What will we achieve out of this? Okay, I know Gaza people. I'm from Gaza. I suffered. And my family suffered. I struggled and faced a very hard life. I know 2 hours electricity a day, and they got no water. They drink salty water, and too many beggars in the street. People struggling and suffering. Fair enough, yeah, I know that. But people just looking for the ending the siege. Ending the siege only now. All right, but did they ask about what is that agreement based on? No. Do you know any? What do you know? If you know,
in the media, it's not
no, that's what I'm saying. One second, I'm not finished. I want everyone to say what they want to say, but I want to have my chance to talk.
Go on.
All right. As a Palestinian, live in the UK for the last 20 years, I know for a fact we should not right now talk about Palestinian organizations. Forget this. We need to talk about ourselves, how we build ourselves, how we become a union, how to make sense to the people who is watching us. Dividing ourselves before, since 2005, that was the main issue, which is the lady did mention a minute ago, this makes our case and make us less respect. Excuse everyone here and excuse everyone who's watching us. We have to, before talking about leadership and who will be in charge of Palestine, to fix ourselves, put ourselves in the right track, in the right direction, to show the others that we are here. We are fighting for free Palestine in a peaceful way. if it works. If it doesn't work, in a resistance way. That's how it should be. Excuse me, there's two options. Peaceful way, as the old agreement was mentioned, since Yasser Arafat signed the agreement of Oslo 93, based on peace up to 67, all right, borders. What we achieve now, did we achieve anything of this? No. Who dismissed the agreement? The Israelis. They killed their prime ministers, and after this, they attacked Gaza again after 2000. In effect, for one thing, and I'm going to say it, and that's my last, Gaza from 1993 to 2000 become a Singapore. They said so. If those people within 6 years rebuild their country, rebuild city, I mean, not country, I'm going to say, I wish if I have Palestine back again, but they rebuilt Gaza again to be a very stunning city and visitable city. People coming from abroad to enjoy themselves in a beach camp of Gaza and have a lovely time. Parents, borders open 24/7, and that. What they're going to do if they have up to 67? They're gonna smash us. Sorry, answer Adelax. Thanks so much.
You will, but right after this. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, discussing the unity agreement between Fatah and Hamas. We took the camera onto the streets of London to see what the people thought. Take a look.
So how will Israel deal with a united Palestine?
Well, I hope obviously they'd find peace, but given the conflict, I'd assume it's going to be quite a difficult scenario to resolve.
I just hope for the establishment, for the Israeli establishment to change and to relate to Palestinian people in a similar way as did, for instance, Yitzhak Rabin, who was unfortunately killed. So I hope for this similar approach to be developed, and I hope that this will also help in this development.
There is only one Palestine. There can't be united Palestine. And Palestine belongs to only Palestinian people.
I think the major problem at the moment is the Israeli government and a lack of peaceful negotiations. Hopefully in the future we can see that changing, and hopefully we will come to a two-state agreement where peace can finally come about in the Middle East. So it's a lot on Israel at the moment. They need to work harder, and Netanyahu needs to do more to reach the peace.
So what do you think can impede the agreement between the Palestine authorities and Hamas?
What I think can impede this agreement is basically all of the tactics that have been already practiced by Israel for decades, since its foundation until this day, unfortunately. I mean, there is an establishment and it changes, so there is room for positive change, but unfortunately we have seen many negative developments lately, as far as I understand.
Well, Hamas might be obviously unwilling to give up their arms, so that could disrupt the agreement.
The floor is yours.
Right, I just wanted to thank my colleague here who talked with passion about the grievances of the people of Palestine and the people of Gaza as well. But let's come back to reality. We need to move forward. We need to try to do something different. The things that we have done in the past has not worked. We are still occupied. Palestine is still not free. We need the overall aim for all of us Palestinians needs to be, how do we find a way that Palestine become an independent state? Everybody has dignity, has human rights, has ability to express themselves freely, free of travel, free trade, all that kind of thing. So what we need now is to try to move forward, not to focus on the disputes and the different views and the different principles. What we can agree on is, yes, we are different. I am following this path. You are following that path. We will not agree, but we can agree to disagree, and we can agree that there is an overall aim, principle, which is Palestine. We all have to put Palestine first and try to work together. Hamas to sit down with Fatah, recognize that there are common goals they can work on. We can rebuild Palestine. We need to rally around the international community. We need to be holding Britain accountable for what they've done for the Balfour Declaration and for the partition plan and for supporting Israel and for insulting the Palestinian and bringing Netanyahu to celebrate 100-year for Balfour Declaration. We need also to hold the Americans accountable for what they do, supporting Israel blindly and supporting the building of settlements, supporting sort of like the siege on Gaza and all that kind of things. We need to be thinking now more strategically to move forward. We all need to work together in unity to make sure that Palestine becomes a free nation.
Thank you. No, I'm going to take this lady. People who haven't spoken get priority. Yes, madam?
Starting from what he said, holding Britain and American accountable for what happened to Palestine, we should also hold the Arab countries, Arab leaders accountable for what's happening. Because first of all, they sold Palestine. They made the people think that the Palestinians sold their country when they left it. They didn't do so. They left thinking that the Arab army are going to liberate Palestine, and they will come back to it, and they betrayed them, and that's why the Palestinians are now in refugee for years, and then they started doing wars against each other, and we are in endless war now between each other and divided. Secondly, we want the Palestinians, yes, to unite and get rid of the corrupted people between them and believe in themselves and in the resistance. There is no way to liberate Palestine without the resistance, and they have to believe in the resistance, in the Iran, Hezbollah, not because we are believing in this section or what you call it? Sect, yeah. But because we can see what's happening. They all unite against them, and still we won. Hezbollah liberated Lebanon, Iran, Hezbollah, what do you call it? PMU in Iraq also liberated Iraq from ISIS, also in Syria. So they are winning, not just because they are strong, because they have belief, and also they are truthful to their people, and they are doing this not just for their people, because they don't have interest for themselves. If every person is not looking to gain something for themselves, they're doing it for their own people. While Palestinians, they lost because the people who got the power, they forgot the cause itself and started to just looking to gain for themselves. Like in Gaza, yes, they don't have a power, but the actual government or people in power, they do have power. They have no. I'm not talking about the power, what you call it. I'm talking about the electricity. They don't have electricity, the people, but like Hamas, they do have electricity, and the people are suffering. And I know from people who are living there, other people they don't have access to hospitals. They don't have access to medication, and they are all suffering because of they have money. They are getting money, but they're not allowing them to have all this. So they have to get rid of the corrupted people, whether in Hamas or Fatah, and all of these people, and believe in the resistance, and they will win.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to say thank you so much for your word. I agree with you, and I did mention a minute ago. Well, actually, I'm going to say now, let's speak frankly. If we have a leader, George غالاوي, I'm saying to you in your face now, if we have a leader in Palestine, got your passion, got your spirit, 10 years exactly, we will achieve Palestine.
Well, look,
Another thing,
Arafat has never been successfully replaced.
No, 100%. I agree with you. Yasser Arafat is someone who no one.
He was the flag.
Exactly.
He was a flag that everyone could.
He's more than a flag. He's a legend. He's our hero. He's our legend. No one even could mention a single word about Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat is our dad. Is our leader. Is our it's just like he's a.
That's why they murdered him.
Yeah.
Yeah. This lady, then finally Yusuf.
I never got to introduce myself. Sandro Atfa from In Minds Human Rights Group. It seems to me, I might sound like I'm diverging here, but it's a very relevant point. We're all singing different tunes. 2017, we still hear people piping on about the two-state delusion. Are we waiting here for the Lord's table to throw us some crumbs? I think the thing we should all go for is one democratic state, right of return for the 7.2 million people, Palestinians in the diaspora, restitution, compensation. Anything beneath that, still droning on to the formaldehyde, which is the two-state delusion that keeps the status quo. And that really...
I wish I could put that little speech you made in a bottle and carry it around with me. Because, you see, this set of demands, this manifesto is very, very, very difficult to achieve, but it's not any more difficult than all the other alternatives, none of which have been achieved. But it has, let me call it on a Saturday, the X factor. Here's the X factor. The X factor is people can respect it. I spent decades of my life loving as my father, Arafat, and I loved his comrades. I was proud to be associated with them, and they had respect. Now when I look at the Palestinian leadership, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for you, and I'm embarrassed for me that I gave so much of my life for this. Madam.
I won't say much. The questions are still not answered in my mind in this program. However, it opens my perspective.
Don't worry, we don't have the answers to
everything. And widen my horizon, which is great. However, I would say, I forgot the question.
That's all right. and think of something poetic to say to finish.
Well,
as you're a poet.
As a result of the Israeli military occupation, we have more than 10 political factions in the Palestinian territories. All of them,
what are the main ones, as well as Fatah and Hamas? Tell us. I actually no longer know that.
The other Islamic party, which is the Islamic Jihad movement, the leftist wing parties, which is the PFLP and DFLP.
They're still going and they're still popular?
They are the main West wing factions. So PFLP remains popular. So what I'm trying to say that all of these political factions, they were established in order to fight the Israeli occupation. They share the same goal, but unfortunately they have different agendas, different ideologies. So the Islamic Party don't work with the secular party of Fatah, Hamas. So this is the problem. I think what we need in the Palestinian territories, we need to put aside our differences. We should have our sovereign decision as Palestinians. We need true leadership. We shouldn't allow any foreign intervention in the Palestinian political affairs. We need the refugees who are scattered all over the world, the Palestinians, to be represented in any future elections. Without that, then this means the Palestinian vote is not completed. There are more than half of the population, they live in exile, and these people have to be represented.
Exactly. You see, I think that this abandonment of the PLO as the sovereign body of the Palestinian people, of course, it was never abandoned in writing, but it was abandoned in practice. And everything then became about the wheeling and dealing of political leaders and factions in a tiny part of Palestine, which in itself was a tinier part of the Palestinian population as a whole. The PLO fell into disuse and misuse And it seems to me that there is no task more urgent than re-establishing that there is no inside and outside, and only the inside counts. That the Palestinians are a people with a right to return, as Sandra just said in her wonderful manifesto, it will become known as the Kalima Hurra manifesto. Well,
our battle is not actually now with the, if we don't now reunited, how we are going to fight against the occupation. Our now problem is not with only the Israeli occupation. Our battle is within the international community.
Well, look, we've only got a few seconds left, so you'll have to let me respond. This is a fundamental difference between us. I don't believe that your battle is with the international community. I believe your battle is with the foreigners who are occupying your land.
When I see actually Theresa May inviting Benjamin Netanyahu for a dinner to celebrate my sadness, my sorrows,
you're obsessed by this.
Of killing my family and my people. This
I've got the floor now, because I'm closing the show. You're obsessed by this. The celebration of the Balfour Declaration in London by MPs is a matter this small. Your land, your cities, not just the West Bank and Gaza, not even just Haifa, but Jerusalem itself is occupied by foreign armies. Therefore, your battle is with the foreign armies and the country that's army it is. The international community will only respect you when it is clear that you are fighting this foreign army and winning. They will not respect you if you go around with a begging bowl and say, that was a previous era that we fought the people who stole our country. Now our issue is with you. Because if you don't respect yourself...
all the world. Our problem not with the Iranian, not with the Syrian, not with the Saudi.
Although the only country you attacked in this program was Iran.
The international community who is backing the Israeli occupation.
Sister,
we have to be actually
none of what you're saying
and
is
in
going
order
to make
to
it...
face these things, and in order to our voice as refugees be heard within the international community, we have to unite it. We don't have a figure for...
please. Because I'm closing the show. These are my words with which I am closing the show. I'm in the final minute, so you'll have to let me say this. If you don't respect yourself, why would anybody else respect you? And if you respect yourself, why wouldn't you pick up the stone like Faris O'Day? Why wouldn't you pick up a stone? Why wouldn't you pick up a rifle? Why wouldn't you use your body? What is the point of being alive if you're alive as a slave on your knees? And it's time that people fastened themselves to the resistance arc, the axis of resistance. It's not only that that axis is winning, it is that it's the noble and principled thing to do. It's been marvelous. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much for coming.